Oriana, P&O's £200 million flagship, takes a bow. A curtain call at the end of another successful cruise. Several tons of luggage are unloaded, and after a carefree Mediterranean holiday, 1,850 passengers reluctantly come ashore. This is cruising in the spotlight, the bit the passengers see. It's only half the story. These are the scenes that will strike a chord with anyone who's had people to stay. Well, you may not have a Steinway to tune or a library to restock, but you know what it's like if just a couple come for the night. Imagine it was nearly 2000. It doesn't bear thinking about. Of course, you'd have to get staff.
Gleason?
Yes.
7. Sunil?
Yeah.
Navin? Vijay?
Dining room stewards, most of them from India, report for duty in the Oriental restaurant.
Cyril?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
There are 914 cabins to be cleaned and given new linen. They call this turnaround day. On shore, passengers for the next cruise prepare to board. They and their luggage have been checked in. Now they'll go their separate ways. They'll be reunited when the cases are delivered to the cabins. This is a film which will follow the luggage and all the other unsung bits of cruising. It's about the men and women who make a cruise, not about those who take one. It will penetrate parts of Oriana that no member of the public, not even some members of the crew, would ever normally enter. So while the passengers are greeted and shown to their cabins in one part of the ship, provisions are coming on board by the ton in another. Oriana's loading arrangements mean she can take on 165 tons of stores in a day, vital for a quick turnaround. In a 2-week cruise, Oriana will consume 28 tons of fruit and vegetables, 14.5 tons of meat, 33,000 beers, 3.5 tons of fish, and 1,000 gallons of ice cream. She also gets through quite a few bunches of flowers. These arrangements have been sent to passengers to wish them bon voyage. The alarms summon the passengers to their muster stations. These drills are essential to safety and are carried out before departure.
Please ask your cabin steward.
That's it, my dear. As tight as you can. Come back round there like that. Okay? Especially with our... Is that all right?
We have clearance.
On the bridge, Oriana's master, Commodore Ian Gibb, has the go-ahead to sail. It's less than 12 hours since he berthed at Southampton this morning.
Oriana is about to sail for Barcelona.
Right in the bow of the ship, the heavy mooring lines, polypropylene rope thicker than a man's arm, are winched in. The sky blue and white hawsers haven't yet been completely discoloured by port grime. Side thrusters push the ship off the quay. The pilot is on board to navigate Southampton water. No matter how many times it happens, there's still something momentous about a great ship sailing. In the engine control room, officers monitor instructions from the bridge. On Oriana, engine commands are no longer telegraphed. The bridge has direct control.
Control room, third engineer.
Home port it may be, but Southampton water is a tricky passage, not least because of the volume of other shipping.
Come to adults of everybody.
The pilot calls the changes in course, but the captain is in command. Only in the Panama Canal and on the approach to Calcutta does he ever relinquish it.
142. 142.
A venerable rival comes into view. Oriana is the new queen on the block. It's the first encounter between the two big ships, and broadsides of greetings are exchanged. Last word to Commodore Gibb. A passenger ship is a floating island, a mobile nation with the entertainment, shops and population of a small town. Its head of state is the captain. Oriana's first master is Ian Gibb. His quarters are immediately below the bridge, where, when he's able to snatch some relaxation, he surrounds himself with Mozart and nautical magazines. But the authority of a captain, how powerful is he?
Commodore.
He has powers of discipline, not only amongst the ship's company, but also the passengers, who sign a contract when they come on the ship, and they actually place themselves within the master's care. So the master has very wide-ranging powers, not allowed anymore to fine people, but when I first came to sea, and for a number of years after, he was also able to fine people a day's salary.
How does a captain spend his time? Take us through a typical day at sea.
Almost invariably, I get called by the officer of the watch at 0700, and then obviously prepare myself for the day, having a shower and going up to the bridge at 7:30. He will have already given me the weather report and the state of the traffic, but at 7:30 I go up just to assure myself that all is well, perhaps only spend 5 minutes up there to see what's happened during the night, and then start on the perambulation of the deck, which is really just to establish what has gone on throughout the night, check that all is well, and return to the cabin shortly after 8 o'clock for the morning slice of toast and a cup of coffee. You'll come back.
At 9, he takes the morning conference in the captain's lounge.
All right. Philip, would you like to start today?
Yes, with regard to the manning of the gangways, if you're happy, we'll use the bridge seaman.
Yes.
Take him off the bridge.
On the off gangway?
Yes.
Yes. Did you do your galley uptakes?
Yes, we did, yes.
And we're getting along well on the deckheads and the crew cabins?
Yes.
The conference is daily for a cabinet of senior officers. Marcus James is chief engineer.
8 and 9 days, so that would work out to about 30, anything between 32 and 40 cabins.
Okay.
Brian Purnell, the purser, reports on hotel operations.
To the best of my knowledge, no problems in restaurants. I think it was very good comments about dinner last night.
We did the telephones on the front desk yesterday, and they seemed to be happier with what we did.
Thank you very much.
9:30 we go our various different ways, and usually I make another walk around the ship then, having visited the bridge. May we have number 2? I think what almost all people, when they first come to sea, think is that the captain steers the ship throughout the 24 hours. How they believe it's possible, I'm not sure, but they always imagine that the captain is standing by the steering wheel all the time. Stand by below bridge control, thank you.
So when is the captain on the bridge?
Almost always at 7:30 in the morning and around about noon, but I make various visits during the course of the day, and certainly always in times of restricted visibility, fog, heavy rain, and narrow passages, when rounding headlands where various ships are coming in from all different directions in traffic separation schemes.
Why does he make so many tours of the ship?
The prime purpose, as far as the passengers are concerned, is that the captain can be seen, that there is a captain on the ship. because the most important task of the captain, in my view, is to indicate to everyone that he is mine host. It is important to see that the routines are being carried out, that the ship is clean. One keeps a very weather eye on all sorts of things. If you've been to sea and you're experienced, having had a number of years at sea, certain things stand out instantly to the weathered eye, whereas perhaps they might not to a passenger. On the other hand, they might, because we do get quite a number of passengers who've been at sea for a very long number of years.
Good evening, Mrs. Watson. Welcome to you. Nice to have you on board, sir. Good evening to you.
Mr. and Mrs.
Good evening and welcome. Nice to see you both.
Thank you.
Frequently, the day will end with a social function, including the Commodore's own cocktail party, to which all passengers and officers are invited on every cruise.
You are on duty 24 hours a day, but I do enjoy reading, although I seldom ever get time to read a book properly, and I can always get relaxation with some classical music, which I love, and my last waking thoughts are always doing the crossword puzzle. I don't get very far with it usually before my eyes close, but I do like that as relaxation.
It's time to go deeper into the ship. This is the anatomy of a superliner, Oriana, from stem to stern. We begin in the beginning, in the forward section, on the bridge.
This is the officer of the watch. The time is now 12 o'clock, noon. A rather hazy afternoon to you all.
Oriana may be the most technically advanced passenger ship afloat, but the time signal still has that personal touch. The Commodore's deputy is the staff captain. One of his specific responsibilities is maintaining the ship's stability. Philip Pickford.
Well, it's very important to maintain ship stability by ensuring that the centre of gravity of the ship is always kept in the right place. And it does move around because we use fuel and water, and we take on stores and then use stores. There's a fairly narrow band where you've got to keep centre of gravity. You can't load the ship too much or you'll be below your drafts, and you can't have too little weight in the ship or you would, in the bottom of the ship, or you would be unstable. As we use oil and water, then we can take on ballast in the form of seawater and put that in certain allocated tanks, and this will compensate for the loss of weight in the bottom of the ship.
One of two officer cadets on board at the ship's tiny wheel. Commodore Gibb was a P&O cadet in 1954. Ship's bridges were very different then. Oriana's is the very latest.
Oriana's bridge is one of the most modern in the world. It's known as an integrated bridge system, which, as you will see, has a command console, a navigation console, and a communications console on the port side. The command console is controlled from here, and normally at sea, the officer of the watch sits in this particular chair, watching the radar and keeping a lookout. The system has the ability to show you what speed you're doing, what speed you require to get to the next port at the right time, and it has not only track pilot, which keeps you on track, but also speed pilot, which keeps you up to speed, all done automatically. We have combinators to give you your ahead or stern movements. We have thruster units, that's 3 bow thrusters and 1 stern thruster, each of 1,500 horsepower. And we have 2 rudders, which can be either synchronous or asynchronous. In other words, you control them separately as a master and slave or as a master. So that is this particular area here. And now we come to the joystick, which in fact translates anything that I want to do with the ship into action using the bow thrusters and stern thruster, the main engines, and the twin rudders. And by the use of this, we can go full speed sideways, we can go ahead or astern, and we can even make the ship turn about its bow by using the center of rotation button, either ahead or astern. The rate of turn is controlled by this button here. But we still have the azimuth mirror to take bearings of ships and land, so we are not entirely reliant upon computers. On this console, we have the MyMax, which gives you a full appreciation of the state of the ship at all times. And if, for example, the ship heels to starboard or to port with the wind, then the officer of the watch can come to the screen, see how much water is in the ballast tanks, and then adjust the water as necessary to take it from one side to the other and bring the ship upright. The next part of the console is the communications system, to which you can talk all over the ship, selecting various points. Then we come on to the lighting panel, the navigation lights, and what we call the Christmas tree, which is the mast lights. Then the stabilizer control panel, and we can see how the stabilizers are working, port or starboard stabilizer. Then on to the deck lights, which is the next part of the panel. And finally, the GM DSS, which is this panel here, which takes the place of the old radio room, which gives us all the navigational warnings, the weather patterns, security, and distress calls. Despite the radar and the electronic charts, we still have the paper charts, the Admiralty paper charts, which we use to establish our position by visual bearings. We have log to give us the speed, wind indication, and satellite navigation system with Decca. But at the end of the day, when we're finished with all the electronic aids of navigation, then it's the sextant to which we turn to if all else fails.
Beneath the bridge is the cruise deck, where they can get sunshine, privacy, and a swim. And below here, the carpenter's shop. It may come as a surprise to find joiners at work on such a modern ship, but Oriana's tradition comes in timber. From the cabin fittings to the panelling in the public rooms, a lot of wood is used.
These for the Lido deck, the pool area.
Nearby, the 1500 horsepower motor for the bow thrusters, which help Oriana turn in her own length. Washing from the cabins, towels and sheets reaches the laundry down a chute, which runs through almost all 14 decks to the very bottom of the ship. It's sorted, taken to the wet section, and loaded into washing machines, nearly as big as some kitchens. From dryers, the sheets are taken for ironing. One machine, not unlike a printing press, smooths and folds in a single operation, 3,500 of them a day. Cruising in the subtropics takes quite a toll on officers' whites. Besides the linen, the laundry washes and dry cleans all the crew uniforms as well as the clothes the passengers send. That's about 1,200 items daily. Staffed entirely by Filipinos, work goes on round the clock. Six decks above, cruise director Ian Fraser watches a rehearsal in the Theatre Royal. P&O has its own theatre company. Highland Swing is one of 14 shows in production, but one of the stars is the theatre itself.
Well, the theatre we are immensely proud of already. It incorporates some features that are absolutely state-of-the-art, absolutely high-tech, brand new, and it gives us a wonderful opportunity to provide entertainment of the very highest caliber. Even from where I'm sitting, we're sitting in ultimate comfort. There's air conditioning from the back of the seats, which provides a nice atmosphere all the time. It's never too hot, it's never too cold. The viewing from every single seat in the theatre is unimpaired. There are no poles or whatever. From a performance point of view, it is just the ultimate. We have wonderful acoustics, we have the best possible lighting systems, we have the stage itself, for the first time ever on any P&O ship I've worked on, is absolutely perfect. The dressing rooms are very interesting because, again, for the first time ever, we have dressing rooms. On other ships in the past, for instance, way back on the Oriana, I changed in the gents' toilet. So now we have dressing rooms which are in keeping with the rest of the theatre. Proper lighting, we have plenty of space, we have actual seating for every single member of the cast. So it's a luxury, really, and it's quite wonderful.
Although it's not in use in this show, there's even a revolving stage.
The revolving stage is a unique feature, again, which is a very exciting, and it leads us to endless possibilities of what we could do in terms of scenery and change of sets. The only real challenge is challenging the imagination, knowing how best to use it, how not to overuse it. But it gives us a wonderful change that just in a split second we can go from one scene, revolve it round, and we've got a completely different style, a completely different set.
Almost £1 million was spent equipping the theatre. The computer-controlled sound and lighting systems are of West End standard.
We have wardrobe facilities underneath where we're sitting, and it stretches for literally miles. Really fabulous. We stack everything in proper orderly sets, which we've never had to do before. So really everything is geared to make it as easy as possible.
In the prop store, the magician's doves prepare themselves for their next disappearance. Next door is a small workshop.
When everybody comes to this theatre, whether it be a young, raw starter to the business or somebody like Tom O'Connor, who's been in the business for many, many years, they take one look at the theatre, and I think in the modern vernacular they're gobsmacked. They look at it and they think, gosh, how did this all come about? Because it is absolutely unique. And it gives them an incredible challenge, and even they feel that they have to up the work performance to sort of fit in with the ambience and the atmosphere of the theatre itself. So.
We've moved midships in our dissection of Oriana. The parts that passengers see are the 2 big pools on the sun deck, and 8 decks down, the reception desk. Here in the purser's domain, a cruise liner is as much a hotel as it is a ship. There are 3 divisions: food and beverage, accommodation and administration. Chris Bullen was Oriana's first purser.
Administration includes the running of the reception desk, where they sell stamps, exchange foreign currency, and answer any queries that passengers may have. And that is run as a 24-hour service. In the background, behind the scenes, though, there's a lot going on the admin side. We also liaise with port agents to make arrangements for when the ship is due in, perhaps the following day. We have to prepare lots of different passenger lists, crew lists, and customs documentation. There is a vast difference in port agencies and officials in different countries. Now, around the Mediterranean, I think we're well known. We're regular callers in at most of the ports. And the first contact we have is to actually bring the officials on board and go through the paperwork with immigration and customs with the help of our local agent. Most ports will give us what we call clearance immediately because they're used to dealing with us. They know that the documents we produce are quite accurate. As soon as we get this clearance, we let the bridge know. They then do a broadcast to passengers saying exactly what's gone on, the fact that we've been granted clearance, and they may now go ashore. On odd occasions, you do get perhaps a more difficult official, which does hold clearance up, but never more than perhaps 5 or 10 minutes. As you go around the world, where we're perhaps not so well known, apart from the USA and Australia, if you go to small ports around the world, you may get a little bit of red tape, but there are ways and means of cutting through this quite quickly, and we're quite experienced at that. Food and beverage is probably the largest of the 3 sections. We serve breakfast, lunch and dinner to crew and passengers, so every day. So you're looking in the region of 2,600 meals a day. That's probably minimum. Could well approach 3,000 perhaps in the summer months when families travel. But again, behind the scenes on the food and beverage side, there's obviously the cooking of the food and the preparation in the galley area, but that is supported by a large operation below decks.
Here are some of those 14.5 tons of meat. Oriana has her own butcher shop and fishmonger.
We have to look ahead quite some way to store a large ship like Oriana. We have to get indents in perhaps 2 weeks ahead to Southampton, and sometimes we have to think about storing containers, whether they be chilled containers, bonded stores like beer, scotch, etc., or indeed inventory items like saucepans or linen. Sometimes there's just not time in Southampton to take it on, so we arrange for containers to go at various ports of call. On the accommodation side, we have about 70 stewards who actually service the passenger cabins. Our accommodation department is responsible for the cleanliness of all of the ship, apart from within the food and beverage operation. And there's a lot of work goes on at night, and a lot of work goes on behind the scenes as far as cleaning is concerned, or in the crew areas. As you can imagine, the crew accommodation is really a smaller version of passengers as far as servicing is concerned.
Chris Bullen was closely involved in planning the restaurants, bars and galley when Oriana was being built. Now he's on leave. The purser on this cruise is Brian Purnell.
Right, already?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
Going through the line.
This is one of the regular inspections of the galley that he makes with chef Colin Bussey. Purser Purnell's rounds this time take in some of the crew's cabins.
Cabin 2177.
Officers' rounds are pre-arranged and work on a rota, so each checks a different part of the ship in turn.
It's all good in there. Yes.
The ship's office, a sort of reception desk for the crew. One important difference at this counter, though, is that the money is paid out rather than in.
Okay, if you'd like to sign here and here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take that.
If a ship is a town, here's the local newspaper. The print shop produces 2,500 menus a day, and any notices and invitations. The daily information paper, Oriana Today, is also printed here, as well as a newspaper transmitted to the ship by satellite.
White trousers, waist 20, 28, 2 pairs.
There's a famous naval outfitters called Geeves, but this isn't it. This is the slop chest, a name which comes from some odd recess of maritime tradition and just means clothes store.
3.
Good afternoon, this is Oriana. Please hold the line, we have a call for you.
The communications center is where the ship's commercial communications, business and personal calls are handled by phone and fax. It's also the television station. From here, video films are played into the cabins. Satellite TV too, when the ship is in range of a signal. But it's from here that Oriana keeps in touch with the shore.
Communication center.
More importantly, from the passenger point of view, they can dial from their cabins automatically through the satellite systems.
Hi, Dad. It's us from the ship. Yeah, it's great. We're having a great time.
And they can dial their own homes or wherever they might wish to speak to without speaking to anybody else. We voice prompt them electronically through the process of making a call, and they make their own calls quite independently, and we charge them automatically.
Thanks to a computer. John Gunner is Chief Electric Technical Officer. The electronics in his charge are more extensive than just about anything else at sea.
It is the first fly-by-wire ship, and I would suggest that it's probably 5 years ahead of its time in terms of the use of electronics at sea.
Electronics are used to control the engines, something we shall be seeing a little later, as well as for communications and navigation. Even some of the taps in the galley area are turned on and off by electronic sensors, without anyone having to touch them. That's both hygienic and saves water. Rather more impressive is the way the ship relies on computers to tell it where to go. They're an important part of what the Commodore referred to as the integrated bridge, developed for Oriana by P&O. John Gunner again.
The integrated bridge system takes in information from all the elements that are on conventional ships, like radar information, depth sounders, speed logs, and wind direction and speed, satellite navigation, and all those elements are fed into a computer network and then are used to control the ship both in speed and track.
In theory, then, the computers could navigate the ship all the way from Southampton to the Mediterranean without the lifting of a human finger.
In general terms, the officers on the bridge can program the computer using the planning and consulting station and the electronic charts available to them. They can program the ship to take a certain speed and various courses between ports, and the ship will follow those tracks and those speeds and alter course accordingly as required. The officers obviously keep a watch from the bridge and have to accept every time a course change is required, but they simply press a button and the ship carries on as programmed.
Computers have also got rid of the radio room. In an emergency, a distress call is sent automatically to the rescue services on the shore and other ships in the vicinity. There's a fire in a paint store, and the fire crew have been called out. Fire is the threat most feared to the safety of any ship. Of course, it's an exercise, but it's part of the precautions which give Oriana its exceptional fire protection. The drill is supervised by Oriana's safety officer, Bill Kent, on the left. The rank of safety officer has only recently been created. It reflects both the priority given to safety and the complexity of modern safety technology. The rank it replaced, chief officer, had much wider responsibilities. By law, crew drills like these, and these are crew members getting lifeboat practice, have to be held every 7 days. Passengers have to have their boat drill within 24 hours of embarkation.
Working from the outside towards the centre.
Just behind the bridge is the safety center. This is where the elaborate fire detection system is monitored. From this point also, all the fire screen and watertight doors can be closed so an emergency can be contained and fire prevented from spreading. There are 5,200 fire detector heads in the ship, all wired into an alarm system that registers on these screens. Bill Kent.
If we have an alarm come up, we can actually get the address of the alarm exactly where it is, rather than getting like very much a broad picture that it's on a certain area within a deck. We can actually now find exactly if it's gone off in a certain cabin or a certain storeroom or whatever. We can then isolate that it's actually gone off through fire, and if we then find that the heat is spreading from there, the actual system will go into a pre-alarm which will then tell us where the actual fire, the seat of the fire is.
But electronics haven't entirely disposed of people. They haven't replaced Rashid.
We still have to have a fire patrol, literally 24 hours a day. We have a sailor who walks around the ship, and he has to log in to actually cover the whole ship. He does a 4-hour patrol, of which he does 2 separate and distinct rounds in that period, and he goes from top to bottom and visits all the places which are like closed up, the storerooms, through the accommodation areas. And so if the alarm system doesn't pick it up, he hopefully, with his period of walking around the ship, will pick up either smoke or heat, or maybe just sort of say a smell which might be indicative of a fire about to happen.
In Oriana's medical centre, a young passenger with a sore thumb is examined by Dr. Stuart Fleming.
Is that you suck that one? My daughter still sucks her thumb and she's about 12. Would you just drop him down at some stage for the next 24 hours just to let me have a real look at that joint again? At sea, it's principally a general practice, a family practice. So the people who come to see me are coming with minor ailments. They may be coming with their coughs and colds, their sunburn, their swollen ankles. That's the sort of thing that routinely comes along to the general practitioner, is what I tend to see. So the bulk of the hospital area is devoted to a clinic, a small outpatient clinic.
That includes a pharmacy, so prescriptions can be made up instantly. But occasionally, the doctor and his staff, and the nurses on board tend to be very highly qualified, have to treat more serious cases.
We have got quite a sophisticated little facility, and we have a hospital behind the clinic, and we would admit any serious patients to that area. And we do, in fact, unfortunately, have heart attacks and strokes and other such illnesses, pneumonias, whatever. We see the range of any illness that any hospital ashore might see. Intensive care ward is really quite sophisticated. We have cardiac monitors which relay into the nursing station so that the nurse can actually watch a couple of beds and look at fairly complicated cardiac rhythms and alert the doctors if necessary if further treatment's required. We have got intravenous pumps to deliver quite sophisticated intravenous medications, and we do in fact use very modern cardiac drugs in our ICU. Most patients with cardiac problems would be kept on board because we feel that principally we can make them more stable in our own hospital environment and monitor them more effectively where we are. But if there's a major surgery required, needing a specialist surgical team, then we would try to get them to a port ashore. This can be done now by helicopter. The helicopter evacuation facilities around the world are becoming more sophisticated.
The doctor spoke to us in the operating theatre. How often is that used?
This is an area we would hope not to use for major surgery, although it is available for that. In the past I have taken appendixes out at sea, but that's rather a rarity nowadays, particularly cruising when you're in port every day, every second day, when obviously major surgery would be landed to hospital ashore.
Our last call in the midships area is to the Pakistani crew's mess. 48 members of the general purpose crew who work around the decks and in the engine room are from Pakistan. Here they have their own menus prepared both to meet their religious requirements and to guarantee some real curries and chapatis. And so we reach the stern. Those horseshoe terraces of open deck are one of Oriana's most distinctive features. Right at the top of the ship is the photographic laboratory. In minutes, this 50,000-pound machine prints the pictures taken by the ship's photographers, and that's more than 7,000 a cruise, and about 50 films a day taken by passengers. The two restaurants, the Peninsula and Oriental, are on E deck. Between them is the galley. At sea, there's no sending out for last-minute groceries. Oriana is extraordinarily self-sufficient. All the bread is baked on board, and the patisserie ought to have its own little shop on the fashionable street in Paris. Oriana's chef, Colin Bussey, came to the ship from the five-star Gleneagles Hotel in Scotland. What in his book makes an Oriana menu?
Freshly produced food, simply cooked and presented to the best of our ability for the numbers we're doing. And the numbers are a key factor in this. As we're cooking for dinner, two sittings per evening, 500 people in each restaurant approximately.
That's nearly 2,000 meals a night. Now consider that a typical menu has 6 courses and that there'll be a choice of 3 starters and 5 different dishes of the main course. The amount of food prepared for those 2 sittings for dinner is prodigious. Add to that breakfast and lunch, and the fact that the 120 galley staff do it every day, and the scale of the galley's effort begins to beggar comprehension. It's like working inside a pressure cooker. Quantity aside, though, how would Colin Bussey characterize the food on Oriana?
We're aimed mainly at the British public, so we do stick to British fare. Ports of call, we will bring in international overtones, local food, fruit, cheese, fish. But in the main, we are British orientated.
The chefs taste every dish before it leaves the galley.
It's all right. Go for that one.
Tonight's menu has a choice of vegetable terrine, Parma ham and figs, and deep-fried squid as starters, soup, either cream of celeriac or chicken consomme, and the main course selection, roast lamb, breasts of partridge, grilled pork, a millefeuille of spinach, or cold meats and salad. One of the things that's different about catering on board ships is the question of hygiene. Standards have to be exceptionally high because any infection could spread so quickly. Regulations are tighter than on shore. For instance, there are restrictions on the use of fresh eggs, and no packaging can be brought into the galley. But even chefs are not beyond the reach of a computer.
There's a new system being brought into Oriana called Fidelio, which is a food cost control system which will allow us to monitor our costs on a daily basis. Instead of arriving at the end of a cruise and finding either an overspend or an underspend, we know exactly per day what we've withdrawn from the stores.
The ingredients for plum pudding have come out of the stores tonight. That's one of the desserts, along with almond-scented apple baked in flaky pastry. It's calmer here, but then it's meant to be. This is the crew mess, part of the answer to one of those classic cruising questions. Do the crew go ashore every night? Behind closed doors, there's a second Oriana. Many of the facilities, like the gym, which passengers enjoy elsewhere in the ship, are duplicated, only a little less lavishly for the crew. This is their library. And here, their recreation room. Conditions in these areas are the sort of things discussed by the ship's committee, on which every section of the crew is represented. The monthly meetings are chaired by the staff captain. What else comes up?
May involve work or living conditions, food on board, anything like that. And anyone can bring up a subject which they feel needs discussion, and it's thrown open to the committee, or a decision that it may be necessary for me to make. And hopefully we can come to solutions rather than anything just sort of rumbling on as a general subject of discontent. We can solve the problems on the spot.
The officers have their own social areas. Their dining room is busiest at breakfast. Next door is the wardroom. Drinking alcohol is restricted for all members of the crew on or off duty. The engine control room, the ECR, is right in the muscle of the ship. It looks more like a television studio than the haunt of the traditional grease monkey. Screens allow the engineers to keep a constant watch on the ship's machinery. This is state-of-the-art.
It enables you to have a finger on the pulse of all the machinery at any one time. This is the most up-to-date technology on any cruise ship in the world, and other cruise liners will follow this now as the sample.
We're on the territory of the chief engineer, Marcus James.
Well, the modern technology we have here in the ECR allows the operator to monitor all machinery, and that includes the main engine, air conditioning, auxiliary engines, stabilizers, fuel treatment, and so on. Whereas in years gone by, the operator would have had to enter the machinery compartment to read pressure gauges, temperatures, thermometers, etc. Now he can, through these screens, monitor all that just by selecting which system he wants to actually see.
Some of the screens are linked to conventional closed-circuit TV cameras overlooking the engines. One watches the smoke coming out of the funnel. You can learn as much about the way Oriana is powered from the diagrams on the VDU screens as you can from getting in amongst the actual hardware on the engine room floor. Marcus James is our guide on a tour by computer.
On this VDU here, you can see the actual layout of the main and auxiliary engines. For instance, we have the two father engines and two son engines. The father engine has 9 cylinders and the son engine has 6. And then we have a series of 4 auxiliary engines, each with 6 cylinders. The father and son engine drives the propeller shaft through the gearbox. And searching through again on this VDU, I can come to the screen that indicates the gearbox. We have the main ball wheel, propeller shaft, the pinion wheels, and also we can see from here which clutches are engaged. The engines are running at 426 RPM and the shaft is running at 125 RPM, a reduction of 3.356 through the gearbox. This at the moment indicates to the operator what propulsion mode we're in. So the overall picture is of the father and son engine on the port side, father and son engine on the starboard side, and at the present time we have 2 auxiliary engines producing the electrical power for the ship. One of our auxiliary engines produces enough power for a town of 40 to 50,000 people. Just one auxiliary engine.
Those 4 main engines produce some 54,000 horsepower. In another part of the engine room, the desalination plant, where seawater is converted into the purest fresh water. The ship uses about 600 tons a day. The process uses waste heat from the engines.
The fresh water on the Oriana is used for various services, obviously for washing in cabins and also for filling swimming pools. So at sea now, we're topping up the main swimming pools with fresh water.
It's comforting to find a simple lever.
These are the combinators which are duplicated on the bridge, and the The Commodore uses these for when he's entering and leaving port, and if there's a problem, we can transfer that control to the engine room just by turning this switch, and then we have control from these levers over the engine RPM and shaft RPM, and also the blade angle of the propeller blades. The Commodore would phone down and say, I need 6 knots, 10 knots, etc. And we will then alter the combinator lever accordingly, and we have a scale that at pitch 4 we can attain a speed of 6 knots, and at a pitch of 10, which is the maximum, we can attain 10 knots, 12 knots in manoeuvring. And of course, at full ahead at sea, we can attain in excess of 25 knots.
Oriana's stabilizers are the biggest ever fitted. They're fins which can be extended underwater like wings to reduce the ship's rolling. Again, there's more to see on a screen than there is down here.
You can see here now that the starboard stabilizer is indicating as being extended by this icon here that's red. And also from this bar graph here, you can see the angle of the fin that's rising and lowering as we're moving through the water.
Oriana burns about 150 tons of fuel oil a day. An older ship like Canberra uses around 250. These, incidentally, are spare parts, a conrod and valves. The waste disposal unit is one of the most expensive ever installed. It extends through 5 decks and works 24 hours a day. Materials like plastic and wood are shredded and incinerated. Not only is the plant big, but it must operate in such a way that doesn't involve littering the planet with garbage or polluting the seas. Glass and china go into another fearsome machine, where they're pulverized, ready for discharge or recycling. Cans and aluminium are put through a densifier. They end up pressed into cubes of scrap metal, which can be sent ashore for recycling.
Fats and oils from the galley can also be recycled. That's collected in drums, and that's sent ashore also for recycling.
We've travelled from the stem and we've reached the stern. You can't go any further aft than this. It's one of the rudders. There's nothing more to see now without going diving. Besides, the audience are taking their seats in the Theatre Royal for the Highland Swing. Rehearsals are over. The dancers have perfected their steps and are now in the dressing rooms, perfecting their costumes.
Ten minutes, folks. 10 minutes, please. Thank you. Thank you.
Once more, the show is about to move from behind the scenes to centre stage. Once more, the adrenaline is burning at much the same rate that Oriana consumes oil.
5 minutes, please.
In the end, the reason for these and all the other hidden areas of the ship come down to the same thing: to provide once more a memorable holiday for the passengers. Once more, the curtain rises on a production whose polish and expertise give no clue to the amount of training, practice, nerve and sheer hard work that have gone into it. The same can be said of a cruise. Last word again to Commodore Gibb.
I think the greatest satisfaction that a master of a ship has, particularly of a cruise liner, is returning to one's home port, having done what one considers is a good job. In other words, arriving safely after 2 weeks away, having given the passengers a good holiday. And a great satisfaction to me is knowing that when I walk around the ship when we're coming towards home in the last 24 hours, people are coming up to you to say that they have had a good holiday, and internally that means a lot to me.